Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Drum Corps Coffee Shop podcast. Hope everybody enjoyed our very special episode talking about snare drum technique, and hopefully you all stayed awake for that.
Or fell asleep if you have trouble sleeping.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Hey, all I know is after that, I slept like a baby.
All I got to say is for anybody that was hypercritical of that particular conversation, know that you're late to the party because literally afterwards on the drive home, all weekend long, all I could think about was, man, I should have said this differently or that differently. One mistake that I can correct for anybody that either just listened to it or hasn't checked it out yet. I think I mentioned somewhere in there that the last ensemble I taught was in 2018 when it actually was in 2020. But, that was COVID year and everybody's brains got messed up during that time. So,
Yeah.
but great conversation for people that are interested into a nice deep dive into the details and philosophy and how we think about how we play.
What's good is you could probably do it again with a whole different set of people.
Oh, yeah.
And talk a whole bunch of other different topics.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But keeping that in mind, real quick, I wanted to take a second, not to dampen the mood or anything. Today I found out it's October 9th, 2024. I found out one of our snare drummers from 1994 VK, Shannon Church, also March 95 VK, and some subsequent years of Blue Devils in the late 90s, passed away today. He had undergone a battle with lung cancer, and he really didn't. He kept it to himself until the end, and he posted that his diagnosis and that he was gonna go home for hospice. And unfortunately, cancer is a cruel effing thing, and I just want to shout out to Shannon's wife and his children that are left now behind, and love you, Shannon, and I'm honored and happy that I got to march with you and know you.
Yeah, and I didn't know Shannon personally, but he marched in the same era that I did, and I knew of him. And I will say that I'm fine with it dampening the mood because I never want us to get used to things like that. Like I want it to hurt every time we hear about it. Like the worst thing we can do is become desensitized to the news of, somebody either fighting cancer or losing a battle with cancer. I mean, obviously I'm fighting cancer now, so yeah, definitely, we put all our best wishes out there to his family.
And it's like one of those things too where, anybody you march with, they're like, that's family.
Oh yeah.
And they'll always be family.
We grew up together.
Yeah. And even however many years you go without talking to them, you can jump right back into conversation like you're on the bus.
Yep.
En route to a show somewhere.
Yep.
But, and moving on, we're here for another episode.
Yep.
And today, go ahead, George.
Yeah. Our audience will probably best recognize today's guest as, from his time with Atlanta Quest. I believe currently he is the ensemble coordinator, but he's been at Quest for over 10 years, like 10, 11, 12 years. Let's welcome to the podcast, TJ Choquette. Welcome to the shop, TJ. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to hash it out here with you guys.
Yeah, man, it's great having you on. I know we've talked about this for a while, but now we're finally getting to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was I remember the first time I really had a chance to chat with you guys in person, especially in Atlanta, right? It was cool. So, happy to do it again, and sorry to hear about the passing of your friend Shannon. That's tough, man.
Thanks, man.
Did you know him too? I know you marched a little VK too, right? George, was that around the same time or no?
We missed each other. So he marched VK. He marched both VK and Blue Devils after I marched both places. But he was marching VK when I was marching Blue Devils. And so he was somebody that I knew sort of as part of the community, but I didn't know him personally.
Yeah. Hey, I know you're down in the South area. You're in Georgia, correct?
Yeah, I'm like 10 miles from Atlanta, from like downtown.
There's a major hurricane headed that's down there in the south. Hurricane Milton.
Is that impacting you guys
is it
at
going to
all?
impact you at all?
Yeah, no, this one's not going to hit us really at all. It's mainly just Florida, and it seems like it's just going to absolutely dismantle Tampa. So hopefully somehow there's a reprieve here, but it's mainly seemingly central Florida, kind of going straight across. So we got a little bit from Helene. I'm like half a mile from a river, and like right at the river there, it's called the Chattahoochee. There's like this little apartment, mixed use coffee shop brewery kind of thing, and like the waters almost flooded it. So it was like cars were like halfway sunk in the parking lot, but I'm a half a mile away and was fine. So I got out relatively unscathed. But uh, man, I didn't realize how bad it was because you wouldn't think like a hurricane that starts in Florida. Normally they kind of dissipate as they go and they hit land, but you know what? We've got students and kids that were going to come to Atlantic Quest from Western Carolina University and Eastern Tennessee, and that place they just got crushed. And it was insane some of the damage up there. So uh thinking of those folks and checked in on a lot of them and they seem to be okay, which is good, but a lot of devastation up there. So we got real fortunate. So hopefully Milton's a little bit less intense down there in Florida, but
Yeah, and hopefully the biggest impact is that, for all of our friends doing indoor percussion in that part of
The Infinity people.
right, like the
Yeah.
Infinity people, hopefully this just maybe will inconvenience a rehearsal or audition weekend or two versus something more major than that as far as
Yeah,
like having
yeah.
to pay a cost.
Yeah.
Stay safe, everybody.
Yeah. Stay safe 100%. And hopefully everybody was able to evacuate that needed it to evacuate.
Yeah.
Hey, so you say you're by the Chattahoochee. Every time I hear that, I think of there's like an old song from like the late 80s, a country song. I don't know. You're probably too young to know that. But I could sing a verse or two, but I don't want to shame myself. So
is it the one where you learn a lot about living and a little about love?
that's the one. That's the one. I forget who sings that. I'm not the biggest country guy, but I just remember did it at the Chattahoochee. There I go. I start singing and
Way down yonder on the Chattahoochee. And I don't think you don't want to say the next line here, but it gets hotter than something.
yeah. But that's cool.
Who does sing that? I don't know.
I don't know. I'll have to look it up. But also, when I think of like the Georgia area, being the Gen Xer I am, I think of there was a show called The Dukes of Hazzard,
Yep.
and I grew up like a big Dukes of Hazzard fan,
Hmm.
and
A big Daisy Duke fan. That's
that
what you
too.
mean.
Yes, well, amongst other things, but
Right.
yeah. Daisy was pretty cool. Her Jeep, I liked her Jeep. Yeah, Liberty. Yeah, but anyway, so
I can't believe you can remember that stuff, but you probably can't remember like what you had for breakfast this morning.
no, I could sing the whole Dukes of Hazzard, just some good old boys song for like the whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't remember what I had for breakfast. I
Man,
can't remember. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, all you.
I was gonna say I can't remember where I put my computer cord until I saw it right now. Looking,
We can't remember to
past
hit
George.
record on our audio recorder for this podcast, but we can remember those things.
I could, yeah, that and the Knight Rider theme song. Yeah,
I'm like you guys. I mean, if there's like pop songs, rap songs, late 90s R&B, if they come on, I'm gonna know every word, and I wouldn't have sang it in the last 15 years, but somehow it's deeply entrenched in there.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then I forget words all the time. I call a cabinet a counter. I'm like, it's in the counter thing. Like I forget the most mundane words. Once I hit like 28, I think my brain just reached max capacity, and I've just been forgetting stuff ever since.
Making room.
yeah.
Making room, that's what's going on. Making room for the new stuff.
I don't know, but I forget, I mean, the simplest of words constantly.
And then when I think of Atlanta, I think of the World of Coke, which is like a Coca-Cola
You visited
museum.
that
Yes.
on our trip, right?
Last year. Yes.
So when we came out to see you guys, TJ, last year at the regional, Rob and his wife made a trip to the World of Coke.
Yes. And I gotta say, I used to work for Coca-Cola like before working for the Highway Patrol, and I like once you work for Coke, it's like you're still loyal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I drink, and I'd always thought Fountain Coke from McDonald's was like the number one Coke until I went to World of Coke. They have the best fountain Coke. It comes ice cold out of the fountain, and I could have just sat there. But
Well, doesn't McDonald's have its own mix of like syrup and this and that? Like it's almost their own little mix of Coke that only McDonald's gets. That's kind of the rumor I hear, right?
I've heard it's the filtration in the water that they do, along with whatever mixture they do.
Did you do the thing? I've only been there once when I was a kid. I was like, I don't know, 11, 12. And they have like the Cokes from around the world, right? So there's like Coke and then there's Tab and then there's like the, I don't know, Indian Coke and the Nigerian Coke and the Latvian Coke. I thought they all sucked except Coke.
That's pretty much correct. Yeah, yeah. I found myself just parked over at the regular Coca-Cola dispenser, and I just sat there and until I could drink no more Coke.
Here in Southern California, if you're lucky, when you go, because we have so many like taco trucks and stuff here, if you can find a taco truck that has Mexican Coke in a bottle, because it's like real sugar versus corn syrup.
Yeah, they use that cane sugar. Yeah,
That's pretty good. That's
yeah.
good stuff.
And then the carbonation is like
Yeah,
a little extra oomph in that Mexican Coke.
little
And they have-
crispy.
Yes, yes.
crispy carbonation.
I'm the rare guy where my favorite version of Coke is an aluminum can. You give me an ice cold canned Coke, either right out of it or into a glass of ice. That's the primo stuff. I would put the Mexican Coke second, but most everyone loves Mexican Coke. I got a second overall, but don't give me a bottled Coke. 20 ounces from the gas station, that's somehow worse than everything else. I don't want that.
No, yeah, the plastic bottle Coke's not good. But what I haven't tried, just, as we're having this conversation, is Mexican Coke with some bourbon. I wonder how that would be. A little bit of bourbon.
Yeah, how is it as a mixer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Like, does that
exactly.
change?
Yeah.
Does that change, the hierarchy?
Like my favorite is probably like Captain Morgan and Coke. And then I've recently got into drinking like some bourbon and Coke.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now that you're retired.
Now that I'm retired, yeah, and I could just hang out at home.
Did you guys see this Oreo Coke?
No,
I heard about it.
It's
I
insane.
haven't even heard about it. No.
It's disgusting. I didn't know it existed, and my buddy was just drinking it like at this golf trip like a month ago, and he was like, "Hey, you want some?" It is literally the most repulsive drink I've ever had. It's up if they put that in the world of Coke. No, I can't. It's just disgusting. Uh, I don't know. It was gross. I love a cherry Coke. I can tolerate a vanilla Coke, though it's not great. Diet Coke sucks, but again, you can drink it. Oreo Coke never needed to have been invented.
Now the flavors I can't do. With the exception, cherry Coke is probably my favorite. Love cherry Coke.
I feel like
underrated.
I feel like when we were kids, cherry Coke made this comeback as being like this big thing. So there's definitely like nostalgia for us when it comes to specifically cherry Coke.
I can tell you the year, 1985.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they had like in the early 90s, they had the wild cans with the different like graph. See, we're going off on a tangent. Sorry about that.
I love it though. TJ, what was your first year on staff at Quest?
You nailed it. This is year 12, I think. Yeah, 12. So 2014. So their first.
That was the first year in World.
Correct. Yeah. So I aged out in 2013 from Mystique. And I was supposed to teach at this place called Palmetto Percussion, which had been a world-class finalist a couple times. They eventually turned into Equinox. I was supposed to teach there. My buddy Elliot Cleveland, who was he's Marching Health. You know that guy? Marching Health? The blue branding, that's him. He got me hooked up at Palmetto. I was supposed to teach there. And then my mom got sick. She got cancer and I couldn't drive, 3-4 hours. So I somehow got hooked up with the Atlanta Quest. And they were in between like going World and Open. They didn't really announce it because they came in third in Open the year before. They did an audition, and then after just looking at the talent, they said, "Okay, let's go World."
Here's why I bring it up, because I think, and I've told this I've brought this up a couple of times on the podcast before with other guests, but I have a little bit of a feeling of kinship with Atlanta Quest because at that time, so 2012, 2013, I taught a group from Southern California, an open group called Orange County Independent.
And they were going head to head with Quest.
And they were going head to head with Quest. And but what I loved about that, so 2013, when you talked about, we were both medalists in 2013, and I remember that year specifically, watching some videos and just being like, oh, Atlanta Quest this year, like it was. I remember the show being really bold, and they were drumming, and I was just like, that's a group we need to be looking out for when we go out to Dayton. And then similar thing where OCI did what Atlanta Quest did, which was, even though Cap City won that year, right? And like OCI took second, Atlanta Quest took third. Both groups decided to go to jump to World the year after. But that word kinship, what I liked about Atlanta Quest, and I feel like, at least from the outside, maybe it is still true about the organization, which is there was this identity of like, we're going to drum, and we're going to drum a lot, and we're going to drum well, and that's how we're going to do this. The design has obviously evolved, but I would say, again, from the outside, I feel like that is such still a big part of AQ's identity. That's from the outside. What I'm curious about for you, after having been there for so long and having been a part of like forming that identity and curating that identity over the years, is that true like internally as well as like, do you feel like when you guys think about AQ, that's a big part of it?
Yeah, it's a thing we talk about a good amount, right? Because that is externally what we're known as, right? Uh, we get told a lot, man, you guys played great. You guys, you're throwing some notes. You guys, you played very clean, right? We get told that every year, and we come in 15th place, so we come in 13th place, right? So we always ask ourselves, like, is there like a middle ground of, playing all the notes and caring about this? Are we doing it wrong? Right? Like, because objectively, like when I watch shows, there's obviously groups that play better than us, but there's a lot of groups that play worse than us that end up beating us, right? Every year. So we're constantly asking ourselves, like, do we need to reprioritize? And over time, we've tweaked a few things in terms of how we rehearse and how the season flows, priorities of rehearsal to maybe try to care about drumming less. But at our core and at my core, like as the head ensemble dude, and I don't design anything, I design nothing, but I rehearse the group, right? I'm the main teacher guy. Um, it's always going to be important to me, right? Like the first thing I listen for, you watch me run rehearsal a little bit, right, in Atlanta, like it's difficult for me at times, and sometimes I have to step back and like close my eyes or like not listen, rather go the other way, not listen, just watch. We're always going to slant that way, and I think that is a part of our identity. But I think there are ways, and again, we've discussed this a lot, and hopefully this year it continues to improve. Is there's ways to keep that identity but meet WGI maybe in the middle for what they want, right? Like last year, our show, it was a drum show, right? Like it was a if you wanted to hear clean, fast stuff, you were gonna get it. If you wanted to be pretty excited, you were gonna get it. If you wanted a lot of depth, right? And general effect is judged three ways: aesthetically, which we do a pretty good job of, emotionally, and intellectually. If you wanted those last two, which should they be only judged on those three things? You have an opinion on that, but I won't. It's not worth talking about. That's how they judge it. We don't do a lot of emotional depth, right? And there's not a lot of intellectual depth in last year's show. So a big priority of us is to meet them in the middle, right? How can we continue to be ourselves and be known as a group that drums well and drums a reasonable amount? But also, how do we get those components in our show too? So,
Well, what I was going to say is, this conversation, this sort of puzzle that you're trying to solve, is one that so many of your peers are trying to do at the same time. But what I love is that, and I think you can look at the quote unquote elite groups, like that sort of top 5 or 6 groups that have managed to solve that puzzle for themselves a little bit over the years. Being yourself and being able to stay yourself, and figuring out the version of yourself that is a top 5 or 6 group. That's the thing. I think a lot of groups sort of get tempted into like, should we not be ourselves? Or is who we are, does that have a ceiling on it? You know? So then they go, well, let's mimic a little bit more than we should. But the only thing that I will say is, and I think a lot of people appreciate, especially like some of the older people, is I love that about you guys. I love that you're drumming, and even if competitively it lets you down sometimes, I love that you guys are about that, and I love that you're, and that speaks for like the results you get with your members too, because Quest members are everywhere over the summer, right? At all different places. You guys are preparing your students to be able to, to take which they learned with you guys and march those groups that they want to march during the summer, And I think that's, that says a lot about you guys as educators.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I think, that's always going to be a priority for us is setting these kids up to do other things. Right. And, to your point, we almost want to, we've asked ourselves, like, do we need to do a show that's so different that when you watch it, you're like, that didn't feel like Quest, right? Like, are we kind of stuck unless we do that? And I think the answer is no. Like, we can't just show up and be Broken City, right? Like, we can't teach that. If we tried to, it would feel, not genuine, because we literally have no one that can probably even develop that, right? But I think there's a version of ourself that can be a little deeper, and just be a little bit more set up for competitive success. And that's something we're going to try to do. But yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be a time where there's a terribly played rep, but it was generally effective because they performed well and they moved visually, that I would be happy with, right? I wouldn't say, hey, great job, it came through, the crowd loved it, but you played like donkey doo-doo, hooray, we got a higher score. I'd still be disappointed, because that, if you ask me what the core of this, some people might disagree, but the core of this activity to me and to Alan Sears, who's the head guy who writes the book, it's a musical activity still. Now, to us it is. To others, it might be a visual storytelling activity that just has some musical accompaniment. I don't know. But it's always,
There's more emphasis in the G in WGI than the beats. I hate to say it like that.
Mm-hmm.
I go to Vegas and I argue this almost every year about how we evaluate and how we balance points and who is rewarded and who's not. To me, the adults are wildly skewed on the sheet. Probably 65, 70% of the score is adults. 30 to 35 is probably like how well the kids do it, which to me is insane, because it's like watching a football game and you're like, man, Bill Belichick called a great play. They got sacked, but he called a great play. Let's give him some points, right? Like, it's all about it's not all about, but it feels more about the what than the how, right? Like, personally. So again, we have to find that balance. But at our core, we want to execute, and I'm glad that you guys noticed, right? It does set kids up hopefully for success. And most kids stay at Quest despite, getting beat by other groups, because I think they care about that too, and it helps them develop.
Real quick, to George's point, I'm that old guy. I appreciate rudimental difficulty and cleanliness more than I do anything else. And I wish, I don't know how the sheets are structured, but I wish they would give more
weight
to that rudimental difficulty and cleanliness. Not just, doing it in choreo, but just throw down some beats.
Here's what I would love. We've had Thurston on the podcast. I would like, just for 1 year, Thurston to allow the Drum Corps Coffee Shop to submit a proposal, to add a little bit more weight to the performance aspect.
It would be like, now showing my age, have you ever seen Mary Poppins?
Sure.
when the kids are writing what they're looking for in a nanny, all the sugar and spice, and
Hmm.
I want to see beets, I want to see flam drags, I want to see just
Yeah.
but clean.
Well, and TJ, that also, it's interesting because the something I used to say when I was on staff at Dark Sky was the judges are never going to change my mind about what we need to do. Okay, there's like I always prided myself on knowing what the tape was going to sound like, and I'm sure you have that. I mean, you've been doing this consistently longer than I have. I'm sure you can predict a lot of what the judges say. Reconciling that with the numbers and all of that is a whole other thing. But the metric that you're following, right? Like you're measuring your efforts and what guides how you do things by a little bit of a different metric because your values, right, lie in something like the competition side is a part of it because it really impacts the experience. But there's something a little bit more valuable that is your actual target, right? A good education, a nice home for all of your performers. And then competitive success is sort of in there as part of that, but it's not necessarily, I would assume, at the top of what you guys are trying to do.
Yeah, to me, I'm a competitive guy, right? Like I was an athlete before I was a drum guy, right? So like I grew up playing pretty high level soccer, not very high level basketball, like JV stuff. But like I wanted to beat you, right? Like that was what I wanted to do. And it's still very important to me. It really is. I know I don't necessarily like talk numbers with the kids too much. But there's something about competitive success that most kids really buy into if it's tangible, right? It's not like, hey, we're gonna beat these guys, but like when we missed prelims or when we missed semifinals in 22, the rallying cry was we need to be competitively successful and come in 15th place or better, right? And like having something tangible to believe more than just like we're gonna work hard, it helps, right? Having that goal. For me, it's balancing how much are we leaning into competitive success because it is a subjective activity, right? Like if you ask me where I thought we should have placed, probably higher than 12th, right? Not to say I think that every year, right? But there's some subjectivity that no matter how well you think you do, 8 people are going to decide it for you, right? So you can't put all your eggs in the competitive basket or one bad season and there's no culture anymore, right? So it's balancing. I like to think there's 3 things, right? We gotta make good people, right? We have to treat them like people, and I talk to them like they're adults. We give them decent autonomy. We treat them well. We hold them to a pretty high standard, and hopefully they know what the standard is. And if they don't uphold it, sometimes they get chewed out here and there, but it hopefully feels legitimate, right? We don't scream just to scream. We don't call them names. We try to train kids that are going to be resilient, kids that are going to be responsible, kids that are going to be committed, kids that can fight through some adversity, right? And that matters to me a lot, right? I talk to the kids every year. The most important thing you do this year, and the most important thing to me as a human is if you say you're going to do something, you do it, right? So like making those values I think are most important. So like just making good people, setting them up for success outside of this. And it sounds so cliche, but I'm big on proactive communication and hopefully training them to be a better adult as they grow up helps, right? And then other than that, hopefully we make them a better player slash performer slash marcher, right? So we give them the technical skill set, we explain the why, we explain the how, we give, constant reinforcement, to be a better player and a better performer. And those are equal to the way I phrase it is I want to have processes in place that allow us to have a competitive show, right? Like that's the third pillar for me. What can we do as a staff from my side of it, which is execution and teaching and preparation and planning and, coaching, the design staff, how they design it, what they design. It can't guarantee competitive success, but are we trying to do the right stuff? Are we hitting our deadlines? Are we putting the kids in a spot to where we think we're getting closer to the competitive success we want every year. So those three things are pretty close to in tandem. Like I wouldn't say there's one that's more important than the other. Um, and I think we failed some years on the competitive thing, right? Did we give them a process and did we give them a show? Like, could we have done something better in July or August that's gonna, give them better success in March? Probably, right? And there's some things we mess up every year from a teaching standpoint, right? Like, are there things we did wrong last year that I could have planned better? Yeah, communicated better. Yeah, more consistent wording, whatever. Yes. Um, but to me, I'm the most critical guy in the room always of myself and everyone. And it's what can we fix on those three pillars to make sure that this is a place kids want to stay? Because if you treat them well and you teach them well and they see the buy-in from the staff that you're really working to give competitive success and hopefully you get it, they're not really going to leave too much. We'll lose a few every now and then, lose a kid to Broken City a couple years ago, Rhythm X, maybe one to Mystique. And some kids, they want the tangibility of someone putting a medal on their neck, right? And I get that. And hopefully we get there one day. But to me, those are the three things that matter most.
And by that measure, you guys have been hitting the mark. Because if it's like, are we doing this, like the way we're sort of describing, retention and kids really feeling like Quest is a place that's my home. I want to build it up. Even though there might be other opportunities out there, that again is a measure that lets you know, okay, yeah, it's validating for all of those points. Can we go back in time? Because what were you going to say?
I was just going to say real quick before we leave this, I wanted to just give a shout out to Q2 also because those guys were drumming last year and they really impressed the heck out of me. They were like my the pleasant surprise that I ended up.
And by extension, which I think TJ, a lot of credit goes to you guys as being sort of like the big independent group in the area, but just indoor percussion in your part of the country has really grown from the outside perspective. So this idea of like, as Quest gets better, Georgia percussion gets better, or even just, the South percussion in the South. Cause I know that there's groups from like Alabama that come through.
The Sparkman High School.
Sparkman, was great last year.
Yeah, man, they're fantastic. What's the other high schools there from Georgia? Is it
Milton, Lambert.
Lambert. There was Pedal in Mississippi was really good for a while. And yeah, Sparkman. I talked to Jack Albert, who ran that program for a little bit, and hopefully trying to build a pipeline there. Right, we've got a few of those kids coming out that were at the first audition. Right, so hopefully there can be a potential marriage there because they were balling. They were great.
Last year, Sparkman was scary. Like, wow, what is this?
Yeah, I'm upset that Sparkman was on my list to film the morning of Atlanta finals.
Yeah.
And I was sick that day. So I actually got to the lot in time to get you guys. But I'm glad you got them.
Yeah. Yeah. So am I. Because like I said, they were just a pleasant surprise,
Yeah. Okay. But like I was saying before, because TJ, I think a lot of people that have seen you, known you, heard you talk, seen you in action, from the outside, like, you come off as a person of conviction. Like even in you describing, here are our pillars, these are our values, a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of certainty there, and a lot of like, you're fulfilling the responsibility to yourself of like, I feel like this is the way we should be proceeding. Can we go back to a younger TJ when the TJ that was just becoming, like finding out about this thing, the whole marching band, drumline, indoor percussion,
back when it was T and no J.
What was your first exposure to the activity, or even just drumming in general?
Yeah, so my sister was a trumpet player. She was older than me. She's 4 years older than me, somewhere in there, 3 years. and she played trumpet in band. And I thought that was cool, but I always wanted to be a drummer. And like my mom and dad, like they weren't musicians, but they had reasonably good voices. My sister was in chorus, right? So I liked music. I grew up around music, but like I was never trained. I never got piano lessons. I think my parents, they either got me or they got my sister Julie a guitar when we were young, and like we never got lessons, and we just like messed around and we were terrible. Yeah, I mean, I never got anything. I was terrible. But there was never any training. But I said, I want to be a drummer. So you go to the sixth grade like placement night, right? You go to the middle school and you try out all the instruments. And they had us play a paradiddle, I guess. And I remember this distinctly. I sucked. I could not go right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. But they handed me a mouthpiece for a trumpet, and apparently I had a very like pristine natural embouchure, right? And I created like a nice sound. And the guy was like, "Oh, you need to play trumpet." And I said, "Okay, I guess I'm a trumpet player." So I go home and I tell my sister, "Hey, I'm playing trumpet like you." She goes, "No, you're not. You're playing drums like you want to play drums." So you go back there and you tell them you're gonna be a percussionist. So I say, "Fine, I guess I'm playing drums again." So if my sister didn't do that, I don't know if she did that because she just didn't want me to play trumpet like her. I don't know. But if she wouldn't have said that, I would be a trumpet player.
You know what's funny, TJ? Not to interrupt you, but just really quickly, that reminds me. Was it Taha who had that same story where like they were going to sort him onto like a horn
Oh
or
yeah.
something like that, and his mom said no.
Go tell him you want to play
Go,
drums.
go tell him
Yeah.
you want to play drums, and in that story, it was thanks, mom.
Yeah.
You know, so that was a.
I need to ask him. I gotta ask Todd. He's one of my best friends. He was a groomsman in my wedding, so that'd be funny if that was both our origin stories. But no, so I did band, did the concert band thing through middle school. The first thing I remember seeing was like '05. There was a show in Kennesaw. It was like Cavaliers. Um, was it the Chicago Fire show or something like that? I think it was them, it was Phantom, it was Cadets, which was the Zone. Like that was the first thing I ever saw in person. Now, prior to that, I had seen videos of like Cavaliers 2000 and like BD. What's that? I learned the one spree. There's like some double flam drags, some like threes. What might that have been New Year's?
13th hour or something like that. Maybe. I don't know.
It was an actual spree.
Esprit.
Yeah, it entered like some flam. Did you play that one?
Oh, I didn't play that one.
No.
No, that one was after my time.
Okay, yeah. So I learned that, and so I was like I didn't have a group I liked yet, but I loved them all. And that was early. That was probably ninth, 10th grade. If it was '05, that would have been like ninth grade. Uh, and we were a match group band. And after that, I went up to my band director junior year. I was like, "Hey, can we play traditional grip? I want to march." And he goes, "Just if you guys can learn it," he said this to me and my buddy. He goes, "If you guys can learn it by band camp, yeah, we'll be a traditional group." Right. So I said, "Okay." This was like in, I don't know, February or March. So we're like, like, we don't know what the hell we're doing, but we worked our ass off and we showed up in like June and like we were kind of doing something. And he was like, "All right, fine." So he eventually taught us. And then, yeah, from there, I marched at the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. Tough game the other day against Bama, but we're hopefully back.
I hope you guys don't have to play Vanderbilt.
God, we normally do, but ever since the SEC turned into this giant thing, I don't even know who plays who anymore. But yeah, that was wild. That was wild.
For those that don't know, we're talking the one of the upsets of the century so far. Vanderbilt beating Alabama.
Correct. And it actually made me mad. Like normally I'd be happy to see Vanderbilt beat Bama, but I was pissed off. Like, how did we lose to this team last week that's getting smoked by Vandy? Anyway, so I marched for there. I marched a few indoor groups. My buddy Zach Marshall, who writes the drill at Atlanta Quest, he's been there since 2012. He's my old roommate. We marched together at UGA, and his dad ran a group called Pariah. I don't know if you remember Pariah, but we might have competed with OCI. They were medalists a couple times. We won open class in '09, so I marched there a few years. Then I did this terrible group called Terminus Atlanta Percussion.
I remember them.
Um, oh yeah, you do
Yeah.
the clown show.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like to say I was Captain Clown. So I was the center snare.
What
And
year is
we
this so I could look it up on
Is
YouTube?
this like 2010?
2011. Yeah, so I was there. That was a merger of Pariah, and then there was this group called Odyssey, and Odyssey was pretty good for years in the early 2000s, and they I think were losing steam, and they merged because at the time Atlanta had like 4 or 5 WGI groups. There was an A group, there was one world group, like 2 or 3 open groups. So the talent was just so spread out. So they tried to consolidate it to where it was Terminus, and then really Atlanta Quest was the open group, and then Terminus was the world group that merged. Um, anyway, so I did that. We were terrible. We came in. I like to tell the story. We got like an 83 at the Spartanburg Regional in like early March, and then we got like a 77 at finals. So we worked like a month and a half and got 6 points worse. Uh, so that was fun. That was fun. But so we did that, and then I hopped over to Mystique. So I did 2 years at Mystique in 2012 and 2013. Yeah, that was Taboo, the Suit Show, and that was my age out. And then 2012 is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. New Tribe. Yeah, that show was badass and hard.
I'm not familiar with that one. I'm gonna have to go.
New Tribe?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like that was like their sort of post-apocalyptic um, you know, they're all marked up and dressed up in like weird like feathers and fur and stuff like that.
That's not the one with like a big clock.
No.
You know what
But
I'm talking
That's
about?
like oh four. No, that's not oh four.
I don't know.
But 2013 Taboo is from that era one of my favorite Mystique shows. I just really loved the vibe of that show.
I love that show. I love 13. A lot of people are iffy on it. I thought it was fantastic. I love the music. I love the feel. The drill was hard but easier for me because 12 I was just getting my ass kicked the whole time. So it was a much better.
That was actually the show that because Mystique's shows musically because of Shane's design they have a very specific sort of feel to them because of their sort of tendencies, and even though the context will change wildly, the premises will change wildly year to year, you can still tell musically that it's Mystique. And because I was so into that 13 show, that's what sort of I was like, why do I like this so much? And then I sort of found that in future shows subsequently, like that same sort of core thing that really that I really liked.